Crime Stands Still. One season, one story by Marjorie Orbin. The podcast that delves deeply into true crime stories post-conviction, resolving cases, bringing you new evidence, fresh perspective, and revisionist theories, the whole truth and not just what the jury heard. Giving voice to the voiceless is my passion and the inspiration behind this new Just Us project. I'm a criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor, and multi-published award-winning true crime author. I'm also a national speaker and expert in criminal pathology. Crime Stands Still retells what happened from why through reenactments, verbatim testimony, transcripts, audio recordings, and first-hand journal compositions, bringing you different voices and points of view, the suspects and others that you won't find on any other podcast. Subscribe, listen, and download for free from your preferred podcast app on Apple or Android devices. Original score, sound design, and mixing by composer and drummer Marjorie Orbin. Season 1, Firefly, Episode 5, The Right Red Coat. Marjorie's lawyer, a seasoned criminal defense attorney, soft-spoken and unimposing, addressed the jury.
Emotions may get to you, cloud your judgment. You may not like Marjorie, might think she's too pretty, too privileged, just a showgirl wearing a fur coat who wanted the good life, but everything she did was after the fact. I'm not trying to tell you she's Snow White. This is not a court of morality. You are not prosecutors. You do not decide, well, if she knew blah, 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 that this man was dead, why didn't she report it? Her son's father is gone. She should have done something about it. Reprehensible does not equal guilt. Your verdict cannot be based on sympathy or prejudice, but solely on the facts. Storytelling doesn't count.
He reminded jurors how Larry was a wannabe military type, and how his son-in-law Brad was too. He stayed on this military theme, rambling on about redcoats and how America's future president, John Quincy Adams, who once represented the British soldiers accused of murdering 5 American civilians, believed in justice too. That sometimes the unpopular side was the right side.
The state gave Larry a free pass. The defense Adams used was, can you prove that these are the right redcoats? Every single one of those British soldiers was found not guilty. Those North Carolina jurors were able to put aside their emotions and look at the facts.
Much to Marjorie's horror, her lawyer went from the redcoats analogy to another military story, this time one from Vietnam, where a South Vietnamese ranger had been mistakenly killed by U.S. Marines. When it was the prosecutor's turn, she pointed to Marjorie and said with some disgust, "There's only one redcoat. The redcoats have all been identified."
I couldn't stand it. What the fuck did redcoats have to do with anything? That was the best he had? A history lesson? He had my life in his hands. He might as well have cut out my heart and served it to them still beating on a platter. I could have given a better speech. Pet Rock could have given a better speech. For hours, I had to sit in that courtroom with guards smirking, my lawyers talking over me, just waiting for the jurors to decide my fate.
If they found that the prosecution had proven even one aggravating factor, Marjorie would be eligible for the death penalty. But jurors were struggling with the idea of intent, whether Marjorie intended to needlessly mutilate the body. What if her intent was only to cover up the crime? They were at an impasse. Ultimately, they found Marjorie had murdered for the money, the life insurance policies that paled in comparison to the lifestyle she enjoyed already with Jay. The final phase of Marjorie's trial was the defense's last opportunity to present mitigation, to show Marjorie as a good person, good mother, good human being deserving of life. At the core of the defense's case was little Noah. Did the jurors really want to make him an orphan? He'd already lost one parent. Why compound the tragedy by sentencing his mother to death?
Capital cases are so complex, so different than regular murder trials. The stakes are so high.
Marjorie had 2 defense lawyers, and her second chair, a petite and pretty woman with delicate features, agreed that trying death cases was
a little scary, just like a regular case, except that everyone was trying to kill your client. It just seemed impossible that a 135-pound woman could dispose of a body of a 260-pound man. Larry committed this crime. Marjorie had no motive to want her husband dead. They had a platonic, amiable relationship. Marjorie had an allowance. She wasn't deprived. She was lonely. And in the summer of 2004, Larry was an appealing distraction. Jay probably suspected the affair. Maybe that's why he came home earlier than expected. Larry used the remote Marjorie gave him to access her garage. When Jay, who traveled with a loaded 357, came home, surprised Larry, there was a confrontation and Jay was killed. Marjorie was Larry's only witness. He wasn't about to go down for this woman he barely knew. He dismembered and dumped Jay's torso and left it practically on Marjorie's doorstep. I just never believed that she wanted Jay dead. He was worth more to her alive. To take her son's father away from him, I don't think she would have done that. I still don't.
Marjorie's story had never wavered, and her lead defense attorney agreed that her version
explained some of the gaps in the case. It makes sense that after Larry, a stereo-popping hothead, shot and killed Jay, he panicked. Marjorie may have thought she was in love with him, but they'd only known each other a few short months. He wasn't about to take the rap for her. That's why he framed her for the murder. Marjorie's no dummy. And while there's no such thing as the perfect crime, she could have done a lot better than that.
She didn't have to stay with Jay. She wasn't trapped. She didn't need his money. In fact, if she'd wanted to leave him, she could have returned to her former fiancé with whom she'd once appeared on Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. But she'd refused to separate Noah from his father. That's who Marjorie was, a devoted mom whose love for her child and the child's relationship with his father surpassed her own needs.
One by one, surviving family members stood at the podium and remembered Jay. They'd started a tradition, they said. Every year on September 8th, family and friends celebrated his 49th birthday. They cut a cake and recalled his life. No one spoke in person on Marjorie's behalf.
We had reservations about Marjorie testifying. Our defense had centered around the impossibility of someone as petite as her having the strength to chop up a body and stuff it in a tub. But 5 years in the jail, eating moldy cheese and bologna sandwiches had taken a toll on Marjorie's appearance. She looked more like a linebacker, husky. And I was pretty sure the jury didn't like her. But after they found her guilty, Marjorie wanted to say something.
The judge kept telling me what I couldn't say. I couldn't say I was innocent. I couldn't say Larry did it. I couldn't say I wasn't there, had nothing to do with any of this. I couldn't say anything about whatever they called residual doubt. Instead, I could talk about my feelings and why they should spare my life.
After listening patiently to all the things she couldn't say, all the potential legal landmines she might step in, Marjorie raised her hand.
May I ask a question?
The judge turned to her lawyer, cautioning her, asking her lawyers to find out what it was Marjorie wanted to say.
So I can't say anything?
The judge stressed that this last phase was only about mitigation. What did she want the jury to know about her life? Who she was before she was this? Marjorie shook her head, overwhelmed with emotion, and said,
There's nothing for me to say.
Resigned, Marjorie listened as the judge edited her carefully crafted statement that she was innocent. What remained was a highly redacted version the judge suggested she review again.
I never got to testify at trial. My lawyers advised me not to, said they were pretty sure we'd won, and why give the jury any room to doubt? I'd just wasted 5 years of my life, time with my son, and months of insane testimony about pig experiments and tub demonstrations and that fucking redcoat speech, and I was half out of my mind with frustration. It was as if I were watching actors perform the wrong play with the wrong script, and I wanted to charge that stage and yell, "Cut!" It was like I was being punished for going to trial. I went to trial because I was innocent. Why, just because the jury disagreed, would I suddenly stop maintaining my innocence? Do you know what it's like to listen to lawyers talk about what happens to me in the event the jury decides I should die? I hadn't even given my statement yet, and they were discussing procedure. The jail had already packed up my property, cleaned out my cell. They had everything in garbage bags sitting in the middle of the floor. It was surreal, as if I ceased to exist anymore. Couldn't they just have had the decency to wait for the verdict? I mean, they even took my makeup. I couldn't even look like a human being when I gave my final statement.
When she finally did address the jury, her hands shook. Her voice cracked with emotion. She wore bright pink lipstick and eyeliner. Her once platinum hair, now mousy brown, fell thick across her shoulders. This is what she told them.
I've never been in trouble in my entire life before. But now, my life is over. When Jay died, I lost my spouse, my child, my home, my life, and my extended family. I also lost my best friend. Jay knew me well, and he loved me anyway, all of me. People said we were opposites because Jay was so down to earth and I was such a glamour puss. But in every important thing, Jay and I were just alike. We were a team. We went through hell and heartache together to have our son, Noah. Fertility treatments, surgeries, in vitro, all expensive, painful, dangerous, and risky procedures. On Mother's Day, I used to give Jay a card because of all that he went through with me. Noah was our universe. I may never see him again. I don't know how to live with that. I don't know how to ask you what I need to ask you. I don't feel like I know you at all or that you know me. I'm more emotional than I let people see, and I have a strong faith. I've spent a lot of time on my knees in the last 5 years asking for forgiveness and guidance. I'm asking you for mercy. Please. Only God has a right to take a life.
After lengthy deliberation, the jurors decided to let her live.
The judge sentenced me to natural life. He might as well have killed me. My life was over already. He called me a murderer, said I had a dark side I unleashed on the world. It's not true. I've always been a firefly. I've had the most dazzling life, performed all over the world as a dancer, a platinum doll. I positively glittered. In this place, in this dark, I'm nothing but a big black bug.
I've represented Marjorie for over 10 years in post-conviction, tirelessly poring over transcripts, thousands of pages of case files, recordings, interviews, and investigations. The details are as beguiling as she is, with so many false starts, missteps, bizarre twists, and unlikely characters, and new evidence, including DNA, all of which the judge ultimately found unpersuasive. Yet through it all, Marjorie has been at times emotional, reserved, professional, incredulous, and above all, striking. And not just for her timeless beauty, but for her adaptability. She's made the most of her one precious life. Even in prison, she's doing her best to keep other inmates' spirits up. She runs an exercise program called Step Up, hoping to inspire prisoners to live healthier, have goals, forgive themselves. She tries to stay busy, keep her mind active and distracted from the thoughts that race through her head, the grisly images of Jay that still haunt her, the pain of losing Noah. He's an adult now, and he's visited her a few times in prison, but once that bond is broken, it's nearly impossible to repair.
I'll always have memories. It's like we're frozen in time. He'll always be 8 years old. I'll always be his mom. It was painful to have him, but it was painful to lose him. That kind of pain never goes away. And it's only been compounded because he thinks it was because of me. All I've ever wanted was to tell my story for him, so he'll know the truth, so he'll know I didn't do this. I couldn't even imagine this if I were a horror writer. Did you know I wrote a book?
I shook my head but encouraged her to tell me more.
I wrote it while I was in here, with a tiny pencil. It was over 100 pages. I titled it, High Heels and Lowlifes, My Life as a Dancer. I never shared it with my lawyers.
She gave her only copy of the manuscript to my friend and fellow author Shanna Hogan, to include in her book, Dancing with Death, the true story of glamorous showgirl, her wealthy husband, and a horrifying murder.
I wanted her to tell the truth, that all of this was just a horrible accident, that Larry and Jay surprised each other, both mistakenly thinking the other was an intruder. It still haunts me. I never saw Jay's body, never really knew what happened in that garage. I only knew what Larry told me, and I believed him because I wanted to believe him, because the reverse was more than I was willing to process at the time. But in here, I've had so much time to ruminate on the monster Larry is. Even if it was an accident, what he did to Jay, what he did to me, to Noah, it's unthinkable. I'd known cruel people in my life, abusive men in my life, but I'd never known anyone like Larry. I want people to know there are people in the world like him, predators, and people like me who rot in prison, taking the fall for people like him. To say that I've made poor choices in my life, especially with men, would be the understatement of this century. I am not innocent. I helped Larry cover up a murder. I lied for him so that he could be free. I will live with that for the rest of my life.
In her manuscript, she wrote of her decision to help Larry. This is her quote. "This has to go in the Guinness Book of World Records of what the hell was I thinking. I was not myself, and I was in a very vulnerable, fragile, traumatized frame of mind. I was very fearful and pretty paranoid myself. What was going on was very serious and frightening."
When I learned of the dismemberment, I couldn't believe it. Couldn't wrap my brain around it. I made my lawyer drive me to Larry and Jody's house so I could confront him. He was hysterical, yelling, "What did you expect me to do? We couldn't think of anything else to do." He'd used the plural, we.
Marjorie grew quiet, reflecting on that fateful exchange. She wrote about her distress, how shocked she was to hear of Larry's, quote, solution to the problem. He exploded, slapped her across the face, dragged her by the hair, and violently pulled her arms behind her back. This is a quote. "It would be that easy," she wrote of Larry, "to snap Noah's scrawny neck."
I knew in that moment that Larry was a psychopath. I will never forget that statement or the look on his face. I knew then that he was totally crazy. We never spoke again after that incident, but I felt his control nonetheless. I received strange calls in the middle of the night, hang-ups, and a voice on the other end. "I'm watching you."
Why didn't you tell anyone?
I had already lied so much to the police. I guess I hoped they would figure it out, arrest Larry, and the truth would come out. That's all I ever wanted.
What about justice for Larry?
I don't know what I think about justice anymore. I used to believe if you just told the truth, everything would turn out all right in the end. But it didn't. And I know what you must be thinking. I didn't tell the truth at first to police. I lied to cover up the truth, and look what happened. Witnesses lied about me in court, and look what happened. Lies are poisonous. Somebody out there knows the truth of that night. I'm absolutely convinced Larry has told someone. He had help cutting up Jay's body and moving that tub into the desert. At least 3 people know what happened that night. There are 3 unidentified DNA matches to that tub, and none of them are mine. I'm not counting on Larry to suddenly grow a conscience. That requires empathy. I'm counting on his helpers. They're out there. I'm counting on them to come forward, to be brave enough to tell the truth so that Jay's real killer pays for the rest of his life.
Crime Stands Still has been a production of Chivago Entertainment, produced by KDZ Studios. This show could not have been possible without the creative talents of composer and musical editor Dmitry Drobin, whose tireless contributions helped bring Marjorie's story to life. Huge thanks to Marjorie for her support, candid conversations, and writings, and to all the cast who participated in many of these recreations. All materials and recordings were prepared from original sources or verbatim transcripts, which have been made public record. If you have any leads or a story to be told, please contact me at chivagoentertainment@gmail.com or through my website, carriedrobin.com, and put Crime Stands Still in the subject line. Marjorie thanks you and remains ever hopeful that she will one day be free.